You know that thing where nothing is technically happening, nobody is yelling, nobody is accusing you, the room is calm, your phone is quiet, and somehow your mind decides this is the perfect time to open 12 emotional tabs and start scanning every weird facial expression from Tuesday? That is not a cute little personality quirk. That is not your brain being dramatic for no reason, although, yes, the performance can be deeply theatrical. It's your awareness refusing to clock out. The second the outside world gets quiet, your mind starts sweeping the floor for signals. The tone in someone's text, the pause before they answered, the way your stomach tightened, the sentence you said too fast, the one eyebrow movement that probably meant nothing but has now been promoted to evidence. This is where the default mode network enters the room. The default mode network is the brain's background narrator. It activates when you are not locked onto the outside world, which means the moment life gives you silence, your brain may start building meaning out of memory, identity, uncertainty, and unfinished social business. So no, you are not broken. You are running an always-on perception system with terrible boundaries and an unpaid overtime problem. And the first shift is simple. This is not a flaw in your character. It is a baseline neural process wearing the costume of self-blame. But here's where the whole thing gets rude. Because over-awareness loves to dress itself up as problem-solving. It says, no, I'm not spiraling, I'm analyzing. Very professional, very clipboard. Very, let me just mentally replay this one interaction 87 times until the truth falls out like a vending machine snack. But rumination does not work like that. Rumination is not forward movement. It is emotional taxidermy. It preserves the moment like amber, and then asks you to stare at it until your nervous system starts believing the moment is still happening. You are not resolving the data, you are reheating it. The same text, the same silence. The same. Why did they say it like that? The same fake courtroom in your head where you are somehow the detective, the defendant, the witness, and the exhausted janitor cleaning up afterward. Response styles theory explains this pretty brutally. Repeatedly circling distress without shifting into actual resolution tends to keep the distress alive. So the mind thinks it is processing, but really, it is laminating pain. And this is why you can feel tired after doing absolutely nothing. Your body does not care that the threat was imaginary, symbolic, social, or possibly just someone being dry over text. It only knows your brain kept ringing the alarm, and that alarm has history. Over-awareness usually does not appear out of nowhere like a random pop-up ad from hell. At some point, scanning helped. Maybe you learned to read the room before the room became dangerous. Maybe you learned tone before you learned trust. Maybe tiny shifts in mood, silence, posture, or facial tension taught your body that information equals safety. That was useful once, maybe even brilliant. But then the same system gets dragged into modern life, where the threat is someone not using an emoji, a coworker saying sure too flatly, or your own heartbeat acting a little weird after too much coffee. And your biology does not always separate tiger from text message. That is where cortisol enters the chat. Allostatic load is what happens when the body keeps paying stress rent for alarms that never fully close. Evolutionary mismatch makes it worse. An ancient survival scanner gets dropped into a low-stakes social world and starts treating ambiguity like danger. The past needed a watchtower. The present gets a smoke detector screaming over toast. And then it leaks into people. That is where over-awareness becomes socially expensive. Because now you are not just hearing words. You are tracking tone, face, timing, eye contact, micro pauses, posture, breath, emotional weather, the tiny delay before someone laughs, the way they said, "I'm fine," with the vocal enthusiasm of a damp napkin. And then you start editing yourself in real time. Don't say it like that. Too much, too little. Smile now. Wait, was that weird? Ask a question. No, now you're interrogating them. Be chill, not that chill. Congratulations. You have turned one normal human interaction into a Broadway production. where you are also doing lighting, sound, costume design, crisis management, and live audience analytics. This is where theory of mind becomes both your gift and your unpaid internship. Theory of mind is the ability to infer what other people may be thinking, feeling, intending, or needing. And when it is regulated, it helps you connect. Beautiful, lovely, tiny social miracle. But when it is overactive, you start living inside everyone else's possible perspective while abandoning your own. You become weirdly generous with imaginary versions of other people. You give them context, grace, backstory, trauma, benefit of the doubt, 3 alternate explanations, and a full documentary voiceover. Meanwhile, for yourself, nothing. You say one slightly awkward thing and suddenly you're treated like a criminal suspect in your own skull. That is the asymmetry. Your empathy goes outward like a floodlight. Your self-compassion comes in like a dying flashlight with old batteries. So you keep adjusting, you rewrite the text 4 times. You reread the email until every sentence looks guilty. You rehearse a boundary so much it turns into an apology wearing a fake mustache. You walk into a room and immediately become responsible for the emotional temperature of people who have not even asked you to be their thermostat. And the cruel joke is this: the better you are at sensing people, the more you can start absorbing them. Their mood becomes your assignment. Their silence becomes your evidence. Their discomfort becomes your emergency. And your own inner life gets shoved into the corner like a bag you promised you would unpack later. Except later never comes, because there is always another signal, another face, another tone, another tiny social ghost knocking on the glass. Now add the worst possible advice: just stop thinking about it. Iconic, truly. A sentence so useless it deserves its own little museum exhibit. Because the moment you tell the brain, "Do not think about that," next the brain says, "Excellent. I will now monitor whether we are thinking about that." This is ironic process theory. Suppression does not simply delete a thought, it puts a security guard next to it. So now part of your mind is trying to push the thought away, while another part keeps checking to make sure the thought is gone, which means the thought keeps getting invited back like the most annoying guest at the party. Don't think about the awkward pause. Don't think about your body sensation. Don't think about whether they secretly hate you. Don't think about why your chest feels tight. Perfect. Now the whole room is full of it. That is suppression debt. Every shoved down signal becomes a spring under pressure. Not because you are weak, because suppression is not disposal. It is storage with interest. And over-awareness does not attach itself to random nonsense equally. It is picky. Annoyingly picky. It usually grabs the things that matter: your relationships, your safety, your competence, your morality, your identity, your body, your future, your sense of whether you are okay in the world. That is why you can ignore 20 neutral details, then become emotionally possessed by one sentence that touched the exact nerve you were pretending was not exposed. The brain is not scanning everything because everything matters. It is scanning because some things matter too much. And this is where silence becomes dangerous. Not actually dangerous, just psychologically inconvenient. Because silence removes the distractions, no podcast, no scrolling, no background conversation, no tiny little dopamine confetti parade to keep the mind occupied. And suddenly the unresolved stuff walks in wearing shoes. The thing you avoided feeling, the question you did not want to answer, the body signal you kept overriding, the memory you keep filing under probably fine, even though it keeps leaking through the drawer. This is experiential avoidance. The mind learns to stay busy, not because busyness is productive, but because stillness lets the unprocessed material start talking. So the person says they are addicted to stimulation, but sometimes they are not chasing stimulation. They are fleeing contact with their own baseline. Because when the room goes quiet, the scanner gets louder, and the final move is not to destroy the scanner. That is the fantasy. That is the nonsense trap. You cannot bully an autonomous awareness system into retirement by yelling "stop" at it like a tired gym teacher. The goal is not to become unaware. The goal is to stop treating every signal like a summons. That is where metacognition matters. Metacognition is the moment you notice the mind scanning without immediately obeying the scan. A thought appears, a body sensation appears, a facial expression appears, a possible social meaning appears. And instead of diving face first into the swamp with a notebook and a flashlight, there is a pause. Not a perfect pause. Not a spiritual pause with wind chimes and a linen outfit. Just a small human pause, the kind that says, I see the signal, I'm not automatically absorbing it. That is boundary-based filtering. Some signals are useful, some are noise, some are old alarms wearing new clothes. Some are real, but not urgent. Some deserve one clear action. Some deserve 0 courtroom time. This is the shift from awareness as a sponge to awareness as a volume dial. You still perceive, you still notice, you still care, but you stop letting every flicker become a fire drill. And yes, this takes practice, because your brain has been promoted for scanning for years. So the off-ramp is not calm down. The off-ramp is name the loop, lower the threat value, reduce the rehearsal, and stop feeding the signal once it has given you the usable information. That is the behavioral toolset, not a personality transplant, a filtering system. Because over-awareness is not the enemy, unfiltered absorption is. And if this pattern keeps running your sleep, your relationships, your body, your decisions, your tiny daily peace, then you do not need another motivational speech from someone who thinks nervous systems respond to inspirational fonts. You need repeated reminders that teach the scanner where its job ends. That is why staying with this work matters. Not because one video magically fixes the watchtower, but because repetition gives the mind a new boundary map, a new default, a new sentence to reach for when uncertainty starts banging pots in the kitchen. The sentence is simple: I can notice the signal without becoming the signal.